Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fensky. The Great Rivers Biennial is an every other year reminder to celebrate the artists who live and work in the St. Louis area. It's an awards program that identifies, quote, talented emerging and mid-career artists working in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area. Each gets a major exhibition in the main galleries of the Contemporary Art Museum St. Louis, better known as CAM. And thanks to the Gateway Foundation, each artist also gets a pretty sweet honorarium, $20,000 each. This year's biennial kicked off last week, but it's not too late to see the artwork. It will be on display all the way through February 21st. And joining us today to talk about it is Misa Jeffereis. She's an assistant curator at CAM, and she curated this show. So, Misa, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Give us a little bit of context on this. How did the Great Rivers Biennial first get started?
Sure. So the Great Rivers Biennial, or as we like to call it, the GRB, is a long-standing collaborative initiative between CAM and the Gateway Foundation. It began back in 2003, so this is actually the 9th edition. And essentially, it's an open call for submissions from artists who live and work in St. Louis. And so out of those who apply, there are 3 award winners who each receive an unrestricted $20,000 honorarium, as well as the chance to make new work for a solo show at CAM. And the awards are actually selected by a set of jurors who are established arts professionals, usually curators and artists, that are not based in St. Louis, but actually all across the country. So that makes this award somewhat unique.
So have any of the artists you've honored in these previous 8 iterations, have they gone on to be names that we might recognize?
Absolutely, yes. I would say Casey Zavalia, for example, is a very established artist living and working in St. Louis still, represented by a gallery, presenting their work all over, in various galleries and museums. So yes, I think it's an excellent launching pad for an artist's career, certainly.
Did you get a lot of applications for this year's biennial?
Yes, we received 87 applications.
Whoa!
And yes, that was back in April of last year. And it's an online process, so the applications were received online and then reviewed by our jurors in that way.
And so you send on all 87? They have to sort through all of these? You don't have a winnowing first?
That's right. No, there's no mediation. It's just straight to the jurors.
Wow. Well, we are joined today by one of the people who managed to get not only to the jurors, but managed to get to the very top of the heap and is part of this year's Great Rivers Biennial. And that is artist Rachel Youn. Rachel's exhibit Gather is now on display at CAM. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Rachel, your piece is so unusual. When I was paging through the flyer for the Great Rivers Biennial, this just got my attention right away. I think this is so evocative for anybody who grew up going to a megachurch. Tell us about what you're doing here in this CAM exhibit.
Yeah, so for this exhibit, I really wanted to go all out and really take over the space that I was given. And so I'm in this, the back gallery space, Gallery C. And I've had this practice of making kinetic pieces, like sculptures that move and are really active in their space. And I really wanted to let viewers completely walk into this transformed area. So if you have visited the show, it's there's all these colorful lights, there's the disco ball, there's music, there's actually 2 different audio tracks going on, and you have all of these sculptures that are moving and dancing and flailing. So, yeah.
So tell me about how you make this happen. I mean, these sculptures, these are things that are things like speakers and almost like large houseplants. What's involved in getting them to move the way you want them to move?
Yeah, so I really was, a couple years ago wanting to make kinetic work. I wanted my sculptures to move and have a personality, and I kind of just happened across buying massagers off of Facebook Marketplace and
That's
Craigslist.
An interesting hobby there. I'm going to buy massagers.
Yeah, so oh my gosh, over the past couple of years, I've reached out to dozens and dozens of individual sellers who are just, they've used their massagers, they're done with them, and they're trying to get, $15 for them. And my process of making work has also been driving to all sorts of different homes and neighborhoods in the greater St. Louis and Illinois area. And exchanging cash for these massagers, bringing them back to my studio, taking them apart and then kind of, yeah, attaching these artificial plants to them, and just seeing like how they move and what they do.
I'm so fascinated by this process. And Misa, I have to say, maybe this is my lack of familiarity with the art world, but have you ever known an artist who works in used massagers and is driving around buying old ones on Craigslist to funnel her vision? This just seems like such an imaginative use for an everyday tool.
Completely, yes. It's a very unique process and certainly brought up a lot of questions for us in terms of how to present the work in the museum, in terms of, how people would interact with the sculptures and, the hope that people wouldn't, run into them or get hit by them, or that, the sculptures would survive the length of the exhibition. So there's been a lot of questions around like how the artworks will live on in the exhibition for 6 months, certainly.
And Rachel, you talk about buying all these things, buying these massagers, buying these speakers. How many speakers did you end up buying in order to achieve this vision?
Oh my goodness. Massagers wise, I've probably bought at least 60, and then about
Whoa.
50 made them into the show. And then I've maybe purchased like 20 to 30 pairs of old vintage speakers. And the speakers are actually, they serve at two functions in the show. They're pedestals for the moving sculptures, and then they're also like functionally like playing sound and playing music. Because when you enter the space, you hear like a dance track on one hand, and then the other, you're hearing this church audio, like worship songs. So yeah.
And that's actually a great segue into something I wanted to ask you about, which is, as much as I'm kind of riveted by the how of this, there's also a why of it. This piece isn't just about your fascination with these found objects or these purchased objects from Craigslist. What are you exploring here in this piece, Gather?
Yeah, I think what happened over the course of making this show was thinking about what kind of space I'm creating, not just like thinking about objects or static things, but this atmosphere. And it really kind of started off like I'm creating this dance party or like a disco or like a club floor or something. And all these sculptures are dancing. But I also, have started to like build in my personal narrative and history into that. And an important part of my life growing up was growing up in the church. My dad is actually a pastor, a Southern Baptist pastor, and really intense song and prayer were also part of what I grew up with in church. And there'd be this moment where you turn the lights down and play music, and people would just let their hearts out and just pray out loud and shake their fists and kind of rock back and forth. And I really started to see that similarity with my sculptures. Like I was like, on one hand, they're kind of dancing. On the other hand, they're kind of like worshiping, or they're shaking in kind of an ecstatic way. And so what I hoped to accomplish with the show was kind of creating that gray area between those spaces. Like, on one hand, it's this really joyful space. On the other, it's this really kind of intense religious space too.
Is that worship still a part of your life today?
It's not so much. I've grown distanced from the church over time, and being who I am and being queer, there's a lot of conflict there. But with this show, that wasn't something, I wasn't trying to insult the church or make a judgment upon it, but really just kind of acknowledge it as an important part of my life growing up. And also just finding commonalities between the ways that people move their bodies in space together. Like some people might go out to, a club late at night and dance and be vulnerable in that sense. And other people might go to church and pray with other people in that space.
Some people are swaying at the club. Some people are swaying as they worship. It's still the same movement.
Exactly. And I guess they're usually kind of portrayed as really disparate worlds, but I I wanted to somehow find an intersection there.
Well, I want to play part of the soundtrack for your exhibit to give people a sense of things. And this track that I'm going to play, this is called Heart of a Child. And that track is called Heart of a Child. It's by a band called God's Bod Music. And we're talking today to artist Rachel Youn, who is one of the people being honored at this year's Great Rivers Biennial, which is now at CAM. We're also joined by Misa Jeffereis. She's an assistant curator at CAM who curated this show. Rachel, God's Bod Music. I understand you actually commissioned this piece. What kind of notes did you give them to come up with this mood they ended up achieving?
Yeah, I mean, I really gave them free reign over the whole thing. I really trusted God's Bod's, creativity and their music. And so I just, I kind of talked through what I was working with for the show. I showed them images of my sculptures, and then I was just like, I just want like a 20-ish minute long dance track, and it turned out so perfectly. They did an amazing job.
So Misa, it's such an unusual piece, and it's just there's so much to explore here, and some real interesting thought behind it too. Does CAM work with the artists as they're sort of bringing these things to fruition, or does it tend to follow the proposal they lay out?
It's definitely a conversation that happens, over time. And really, my role as the curator is to support the artist, to help them kind of take their ideas from the studio into the museum, to help them in any way that they need, and to think about how to fill such a big gallery space. Often this is the first museum exhibition that an artist might have had. And so thinking spatially about their work, thinking about how visitors will experience the exhibition and how to provide interpretation for the public, it all kind of evolves over time in conversation with the artist.
So you're almost the doula there to help bring out this child, to bring it out of the process of labor. That was a bad metaphor. I'm sorry, you two. But I can just picture you kind of coaxing, helping with some of the details. But Rachel's vision is there that whole time.
That's right. Exactly.
So, Rachel, you moved to St. Louis to attend WashU. This was back in 2013. You got your Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2017, and you've been here since. Were you tempted ever to leave after graduation? I understand you're from Albuquerque. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm from Albuquerque, and then I've kind of lived all over the United States before then. And I think, when art students graduate, the first thought is like, I'm going to move to New York or LA and just like really try to get started there. And I realized I really love the relationships that I fostered with people in the arts community here. While I was in school, I tried to attend as many openings at different galleries and spaces that I could. And I think that the St. Louis art scene is really accessible, and people are kind, and they give you the time of day. And I was fortunate enough to be trusted with the opportunity to show my work in St. Louis too, and so I'm really happy that I'm here.
Well, that's so great to hear. And Misa, for people who are hearing about this and want to see this for themselves, I know it's not as easy to go to CAM as it used to be pre-COVID. You guys are asking for reservations now, or can people just show up?
So we're requesting reservations, but you can certainly walk up. We are taking walk-up appointments as well. And we have a lot of precautions in place, from, wearing masks and social distancing to plexiglass barriers in between the visitor services and our visitors. So it's safe, and we welcome you here. And
people need to wear a mask, is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
But they can show up and check this out, and check out work from two other artists. I want to mention Khalil Robert Irving and Tim Portlock, in addition to Rachel Youn. That's all going to be up until February 21st of next year. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Well, Misa Jeffereis, assistant curator at CAM, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And artist Rachel Youn, congratulations on winning. I don't know if that's the right word for this honorarium, but congratulations on just a fine exhibit here. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Tomorrow on St. Louis on the Air, we'll discuss how Sloop is returning to St. Louis after a 5-year hiatus. It's a really cool program. It combines philanthropy and competition and soup. It's fun stuff. We'll learn all about that. We'll also learn about plans for a Dred Scott Memorial at the cemetery in which he's buried. And we'll meet St. Louis's new Archbishop. That's Mitchell Rosansky. How does he feel about that statue of St. Louis the King? He will give us the scoop. Podcast episodes of St. Louis on the Air are available at stlpublicradio.org, or you can subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, the Google Podcast app, or wherever you get your podcasts. St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. That's 90.7 KWMU. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this additional track from God's Bod Music. I'm Sarah Fensky.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.